Deep research is one of the hottest topics in AI in 2025. Never waste hours sifting through dozens of tabs and conflicting sources again. Let AI do the heavy lifting. In this video, I'm gonna pit the top 4 deep research products against each other and find out how they perform in real life. The contenders are OpenAI, Gemini, Grok, and Perplexity. I'm gonna score them in 5 dimensions: correctness, depth, presentation, cost, and speed, each with 5 points. No hype, no fluff, no sponsors. Only real-world tests to help you make an informed decision. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly which one is for you. Let's get started. A scientific way to evaluate these research agents is to use a benchmark. There are 2 famous hard benchmarks specifically for this kind of agents. The first is called Humanity's Last Exam, developed by the Center for AI Safety and Scale AI. The other is called Gaia, developed by Hugging Face and Meta AI. But today I'm not doing this. Today I'm using a set of real questions I personally need answers to. These questions range from specific technical questions to more open-ended daily life questions. All of them not only require a lot of Googling if to be done manually, and also need quite some sorting, additional fact checks, and analysis on top of the search results. They are the kind of questions we need deep research agents the most. With these tests, you'll get a feel of how these tools perform and differ. Again, it's not a rigorous scientific test, but it's a detailed vibe check and can help you form your opinion. Let's get the most straightforward one out of the way first. At the time of this video, OpenAI Deep Research is only available to pro users at $200 per month, and there's a limit of 100 queries per month. This one is the most expensive for sure, so I'm giving it a 1 out of 5. Gemini Deep Research is available to the advanced plan users at $20 per month, with 1 month of free trial. That's 1/10 of the cost of OpenAI. However, there's an unknown limit. I haven't reached it ever, so I'm giving it a 4 out of 5. Perplexity has 5 free uses per day, and for pro users at $20 per month, it says you get unlimited queries. That's quite generous. I'm giving it a 5 out of 5. Finally, Grok. For a limited time, you can have 5 queries per 2 hours for free users and 50 queries per day for Premium Plus users at $40 per month. I'm giving it a 3 out of 5. Now let's get into the actual test. This is a pretty typical developer question. I need to develop a new interface for these APIs, so I need to understand this. Compare reasoning model API providers, DeepSeek R1 official API, OpenRouter DeepSeek R1, Gemini 2.0 Flash Thinking API, O3 Mini, Perplexity Reasoner API. Compare their output format, whether they output thinking tokens, and whether they can stream them. You must include the API output format and relevant code snippets in your answer. Also, link relevant documentation. Let's try OpenAI first. I'm using the O1 Pro model with deep research. One thing I really like about OpenAI is it always asks me clarifying questions. This one simple design already improves the answer quality by a lot. I hope the other providers can learn from this. Here it asks me whether I want a table or a detailed breakdown separately. I said table. Then it goes on to do its research. According to their blog, it can take from 5 to up to 30 minutes. Now let's try Gemini. Instead of a clarifying question, it lists out the plan, and I can edit them or I can start the research. You can see it's browsing these websites. While it's browsing, let's start with Grok as well. It shows its internal monologue while browsing the web. Actually, OpenAI does this too, but it's hidden by default. While it's running, let's start with Perplexity. There's a Notify Me button on the desktop so you can go do something else while it runs. Similar to Grok, it also shows its thinking process, but not as fast and detailed. Wow, Grok already finished. It took only 43 seconds. Perplexity finished second. It took around 3 minutes. Gemini and OpenAI are much slower. Here you can see the internal thought process of OpenAI and the sources. By the time it's taking, it appears that it's reading the sources pretty carefully. I hope. Okay, now Gemini has the final output. It took around 5 minutes. Finally, OpenAI took 7 minutes, not too bad. And the output is a huge table, which I like. Let's check the answers, starting with Grok. DeepSeek R1 official and OpenRouter API outputs chain of thought. Gemini output thinking. O3 Mini outputs thinking. Perplexity outputs thinking. Support streaming. This doesn't look quite right. Let's read into it. Output formats. These are okay. The main thing I'm after is thinking tokens. It says all API output thinking tokens. That's not right. Gemini and OpenAI actually do not output thinking tokens. They only show it in their web UI. It says all APIs support streaming. Okay, that's true. It points out that Gemini has a unique safety setting format. That's good. Let's check the output format, if it's correct. No, it is not correct. It's missing the most important part, the reasoning content. This is the actual documentation where reasoning content is in the output. It's actually referencing the wrong documentation from Hugging Face. I explicitly asked for the official DeepSeek API. OpenRouter, I consider it as correct for now. Gemini, let's see. Even by its own output format, there's no thinking token. It says it outputs its thinking process designed for enhanced reasoning as noted in this Google blog. Let's check this blog and search for thinking. There's nothing in this blog that says it outputs its thinking token via the API, because it doesn't. So Grok basically hallucinated here. Next, let's look at OpenAI O3 Mini API. It says output thinking token via reasoning effort parameter. That's not correct. Reasoning effort is an input parameter. The API doesn't output the thinking token. Looks like it also hallucinated the URL. Finally, let's see perplexity. At this point, I don't know if it's correct by pure luck, because yes, perplexity support these, but Grok answers yes for everything, so I already lost trust. But I do like this presentation in this table. Clean and simple, easy to read. These are the citations. Despite having all these citations, it hallucinated a good deal. It reminds me of early ChatGPT. Here is the summary of Grok's performance on question 1. It's the fastest model. The presentation is decent, but the hallucination was terrible and I couldn't trust it. It basically defeats the entire purpose of using a research agent. If its correctness is less than 50%, I'd rather do it myself. Next, let's look at perplexity. Comparative analysis of reasoning model API providers. From the first paragraph, I already see some issues. Let's take a closer look. Streaming is fine. It says no native support for exposing reasoning tokens in the official API, which is not correct. This is true for OpenRouter. That's correct. No API level access to reasoning steps. Perfect. Here it talks about Azure OpenAI, where I was talking about official OpenAI. Curious why, when it sees O3, it thinks about Azure and not official OpenAI. Now let's see Perplexity answering about itself. No Perplexity documentation reference reasoning token support. That's funny, it doesn't know about itself. The last paragraph sounds fine, but it's based on the wrong footing, so let's quickly summarize its performance. It's the second fastest model, took 3 minutes, and the depth is okay. But some sources are just wrong. It got some answers correct when it got the correct sources, but it's impossible to get the correct answer with wrong sources. And the presentation can be more compact and clear. It could use a table, for example. Next, let's look at Gemini. Since we are already familiar with the correct answers, I'll go faster this time. The official DeepSeek API actually doesn't output think tag, it has its own field. So Gemini got this wrong because it was looking at a third-party provider. This is understandable. There are so many third-party providers for DeepSeek, it's hard to distinguish which one is the official one, I guess. Gemini has this comparison table. This is awesome. It only got 2 things wrong. One is the DeepSeek official API, and the other is Perplexity Reasoner API. And the way it is written is more like a technical blog. It's definitely performing better than the previous 2. In summary, it's mostly correct, but it still requires me to go check manually. It has great depth and coverage. It touched on some things that I didn't even know. The presentation is definitely better than the previous 2. Speed-wise, it took 5 minutes, which is fine for this kind of use case. Finally, OpenAI Deep Research. Wow, it's the first one who got the official DeepSeek API correct. It mentioned reasoning content. That's awesome. It only referenced one third-party API and mostly referenced the actual official API. OpenRouter is correct too, and it mentioned that it's optional. If you don't have this flag, you don't have the thinking token. Gemini, it correctly mentions that API does not return thinking steps. Perfect. It got everything correct, 100%. This is incredible. It's way better than the other ones. And the presentation is on point too. This huge table is very easy to read and very clear, giving it a thumbs up. So a quick summary. It got everything perfectly correct. And the depth is exceptional. It touched on all the important bits. There's no fluff, no BS. Straight to the point. It has the best presentation for this question. It's slow but acceptable. Not much slower than Gemini. This is an even harder question than question 1. Basically, I want the AI to help me find the best option for a JavaScript hybrid search engine. I listed my criteria as popularity, reliability, memory footprint, and ease of use. I'll just skip to the end and let you see the results. The first one to finish is again Grok. It took only 1 minute and 10 seconds. Right off the bat, it says no single client-side JavaScript library natively supports both full text and vector search for hybrid search, which is not true, of course. And it suggested that I combine a full text search library and a client vector search library together, which is fine. It goes on to explain why there is no single library, which there is. But if there's no single library, then its logic is sound. And it suggested some decent options. I'll share this answer in the link in description if you're interested. And I'll go straight to the summary. It's the fastest model and gave an okay presentation, but it did not find the target library. The recommended combo is not the best, and it didn't have enough depth. Behaved like a person who sounds confident but likes to cut corners and rush to conclusion. Moving on to Perplexity. It found the correct target library, Orama. That's great. But then it listed another option, VBA TypeScript client, which is not relevant to this question. It is just a client. It is not a fully functional all-in-one JavaScript search engine. The overall answer is decent, but lack a little bit of depth. There are only 2 recommendations. In summary, it's the second fastest model, very easy to read. It found the target library, but mentioned an irrelevant library and didn't mention anything else. For this kind of survey research question, it's important to have a lot of coverage and depth. It has a lot to improve on that part. Moving on to Gemini. It didn't find the target library, but it listed a ton of options. By far the most options. Just like for question 1, it has a pretty good table, and it can export to Google Sheets directly. I'm giving Gemini a pretty high score here. The only weakness was that it didn't find the target library, but everything else was perfect. Now, OpenAI. Right off the bat, it gives me the target library. And it has performance, memory footprint, release activity in detail, community and docs, adoption usage. It also suggests the best full text only solution with the same bullet points and details. Super insightful. This is very helpful to read. It goes on and on and on with tons of details. And the organization of information is also perfection. I actually learned a ton after reading this. It just blew my mind. The final recommendation is also very thoughtful. To be honest, I did this exact research myself manually, and this is better than mine. This question showcased that OpenAI is really miles ahead. Out of 5, I actually want to give 10 for everything except speed and cost. But for high-stake research questions, speed and cost are less important. These green checks are what matters. So I'm thinking about finding an Asian city to live in for months at a time. The candidates are Hong Kong, Singapore, and Tokyo. I want to rank their business friendliness, lifestyle, and ease of getting permanent residence, given my situation. Visas, immigration laws, and taxes, these are all very complex topics. So this is a super loaded question, perfect for evaluating these research agents. Let's take a look at Perplexity first. I mentioned my background to it, and it suggests Hong Kong entrepreneur visa to me. And for Singapore, there's so-called Entrepass. For Tokyo, there is business manager visa. Here's a table for business friendliness. Hong Kong and Singapore stands out with very low taxes. And then there's a table for cost of living, expat community, healthcare, and safety. Most importantly, it lists clearly in a table the pathways to permanent residency. It reiterates these 3 types of visas. And that's it. There's no other visa recommendations. Let's take a look at Grok. In the second key point, it mentioned Hong Kong's QMAS, Quality Migrant Admission Scheme, and the Singapore's PTS, and then the Japan's High Skilled Professional Visa. None of these were mentioned by Perplexity, so points to Grok. Then it goes on to explain what is QMAS, a point-based system for skilled professionals, and it also mentions the investment as entrepreneur program. It mentions standard route requires 7 years of continuous residence, so my past stay might not count due to the gap. That's very good. For Singapore, it says PTS is an employment pass. For Japan, there's highly skilled professional. It goes on, and this is a big table that summarizes everything. Definitely more points to presentation. Ranking and final consideration. Hong Kong is easiest due to QMAS, fitting my skills and past familiarity. So its overall recommendation is Hong Kong via QMAS. Got it. Let's take a look at Gemini. Right off the bat, it lists common requirements for permanent residency. This is points to presentation. Goes on into details. What are the requirements? Application process. For Singapore, it mentions PTS scheme, the employment pass, Entre pass. For Japan, it mentions the high skill visa. And then it goes on to compare business friendliness, which the other two also mentioned. Now, my favorite, summary table. Visa-free entry for US citizens, immigration policy, and conclusion. This conclusion reads like fluff, and the actual recommendation doesn't sound right because it didn't correctly get which path is the shortest. Finally, OpenAI. Again, it took 7 minutes every time. Because OpenAI always asks me a question before it goes on to research, it usually has a very good presentation. It's listing out all the visa choices in detail with requirements, and there's a dedicated row for special talent visa for all 3 cities. Here it mentions something called TTPS, Top Talent Pass Scheme. This is actually the most relevant one to me, which the other 3 didn't even mention. I provided my detailed situation to all of these agents, and only OpenAI successfully identified this TTPS. Everything in this table is very important to know. So this is top class presentation, definitely. To be honest, this is so good I think I can sell this to someone who needs it. The information density of this research is something else. It's in a completely different league compared to the other 3. Lower cost pathways for the user. Hong Kong, the top talent pass scheme would be ideal if you qualify via education or income. Yes, that's actually my top choice, personally. Alternatively, I can use the GEP work visa to start my own company and hire myself. Exactly. And then there is QMAS. Right. The most accessible path for Singapore is to incorporate a company and obtain an employment pass for myself. And it requires $1 Singapore dollar. But I'll need to pay myself a reasonable salary. And there's Entre pass. Doesn't mandate a minimum investment. For Tokyo, it mentions the entrepreneur visa, which is called business manager, yes. It requires 5 million yen. That is around 45k. And there's an option to go via HSP, highly skilled professional. This is by far the most informative and comprehensive response, and it also has the most relevant suggestions. For this question, the depth and coverage is so important you cannot afford to lose any visa options. This video is getting too long, so I'm not gonna include my other questions, but you get the idea. Then let me show you the final verdict. OpenAI is in a league of its own here. Comparing the others with it gave me the feeling of comparing GPT 3.5 to GPT 4 when it first came out. It's the ChatGPT moment for research. Even if I bumped the max of correctness and depth to 10, OpenAI would still reach full score while the others stay the same. but at $200 per month is not attainable by most people. Looking forward to how OpenAI can innovate further and reduce the cost. If they can do it, there's no competition here. Gemini is the second overall. Its presentation is close to perfect. It's also second in correctness and depth. The cost is more friendly, only $20 per month along with some other Google services. If you can't afford OpenAI Pro, I recommend Gemini at the moment. Given the better Gemini 2.0 models, my guess is that it will soon see a big improvement. Perplexity ranks third with decent presentation, acceptable correctness and depth, and the second fastest speed. Where it shines most is the cost. If queries per dollar is a metric, it is at the top. Grok came in last, which is a shame. But it's the new kid on the block, so it has a lot of room to grow. Its reasoning skills are clearly good, but the search integration needs work. It's not as strong as the reasoning. Grok's changing fast, so hopefully we'll see some big jumps in performance soon. After all these tests, here's my main takeaway. These AI research agents are an early form of research automation with decent coverage. They can save you significant time in the initial information gathering phase, and serve as a good starting point for your own serious research. But their weaknesses are still pretty prominent. First of all is reliability. Approach the results with caution. You'll get a better result when you already have some knowledge about the topic. Depth is still limited. Each agent has a different character, and you may need to specifically prompt for deeper analysis. Again, it gives me the GPT 3.5 versus GPT 4 vibe. That also means that these research agents are just getting started. OpenAI Deep Research feels like the GPT 4 moment in this space. Open source options have a good chance to keep up or even beat them. It's the story of open source models versus closed models all over again. I'm going to look into open source deep research agents next and decide whether to integrate one into my own product. Let me know if you are interested. I'm Logan, an engineer and creator building AI tools for the mind. If you like what I do here, please give it a like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.